The tension in the courtroom had reached its peak. A young man, 24-year-old Ethan Carter, sat at the cold marble table, his fists clenched tightly. He took deep breaths, knowing that he was moments away from being declared guilty. The charge against Ethan? Murder. According to the prosecution, he had brutally taken a man's life in cold blood. But the truth? Ethan wasn't even at the crime scene that night. The prosecutor turned to the jury, his voice sharp and authoritative.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is simple. We have security footage. The defendant, Ethan Carter, is caught on camera holding the murder weapon. The evidence is indisputable. He is guilty and must face justice.
A murmur spread through the courtroom. The jury exchanged glances. To them, Ethan already looked guilty. But his attorney, Noah Williams, had noticed something that didn't add up.
Your Honor, my client was in another location at the time of the murder. I have new evidence that will prove his innocence.
Noah narrowed his eyes. The judge's tone was unusually harsh. It was almost as if he wanted this case to be over as soon as possible. And deep down, Noah had a gut feeling something was seriously wrong with this case. But as Noah dug deeper, he would soon realize this wasn't just about a murder trial. This was about an injustice buried for decades. And the judge presiding over this case? He had a past filled with dark secrets. Noah Williams believed in Ethan Carter's innocence, but belief wasn't enough in a courtroom. He needed proof. Night after night, he pored over case files, searching for a single crack in the prosecution's argument. His office was buried under stacks of legal documents, yellowing papers scattered across his desk. His eyes were bloodshot, his mind exhausted, but he refused to quit. As his fingers flipped through old case records, something unusual caught his attention. A faded document from 1998. Noah hesitated. He read the title, and his heartbeat skipped a beat. Defendant, Isabel Carter. Judge, Thomas Holloway. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The weight of what he had just discovered pressed down on him.
Wait, is this Ethan's mother? Judge Holloway sentenced her?
Noah's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. Old newspaper clippings, court transcripts, testimonies. His eyes darted from line to line, searching for answers. And then one sentence jumped out at him. Isabel Carter was found guilty despite insufficient evidence and sentenced to 25 years in prison. His blood ran cold. The trial was built on nothing. The verdict? A sham. And the most chilling part, the judge who condemned Isabel Carter was the same man presiding over Ethan Carter's trial today.
This can't be a coincidence. This is personal.
Noah shot up from his chair, his mind racing. He grabbed his coat, barely pausing to gather his thoughts. He needed to get back to court. But there was a problem. Judge Holloway wasn't running this trial for justice. He was running it to bury his past, and Noah had just uncovered the truth. The tension in the courtroom had reached its breaking point. Noah Williams gripped the file in his hands tightly, his eyes locked onto the judge. He knew something was very wrong with this case. Ethan Carter sat beside his attorney, his fists clenched, his pulse pounding. His heart had nearly stopped the moment he heard his mother's name mentioned.
What? What does my mother have to do with this case? Why are you bringing her into this?
Noah took a deep breath and raised the file, making sure the jury could see it.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let me ask you this. If a judge destroyed someone's life in the past, can they ever truly be impartial when deciding the fate of that same family?
A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Jury members exchanged glances. Spectators leaned forward, curiosity flashing in their eyes. Judge Holloway narrowed his gaze and slowly tapped his gavel against the desk.
Mr. Williams, this court will only focus on the case at hand. Past rulings have no bearing on these proceedings.
Noah smirked slightly. The judge was starting to crack.
Oh, really, Your Honor? Then why are you so eager to rush this trial to an end? What exactly are you afraid of?
The judge's eyes flickered just for a moment, but Noah saw it. Then Judge Holloway quickly regained his composure, fixing Noah with a hard stare.
Control yourselves. If you do not have concrete evidence, do not waste this court's time with baseless accusations.
Noah took a step forward, deliberately slow, his gaze shifting from the judge to the jury. He flipped through the pages of the file, his pulse steady. Then he spoke.
Members of the jury, Did you know that 25 years ago, a woman named Isabel Carter was convicted? Do you know who presided over that trial?
Silence. The jury's eyes fixed on him, anticipation building. Noah carefully placed a document on the table and let his next words cut through the room like a blade.
The very same man sitting before us today, Judge Thomas Holloway.
The courtroom erupted. Gasps filled the room. Reporters frantically scribbled notes. The audience whispered in shock. Ethan's eyes widened further, his breath caught in his throat.
My mother? He was the one who sentenced her?
Judge Holloway's face drained of color. His fingers curled into a tight fist.
That case is irrelevant, Mr. Williams. It has nothing to do with these proceedings.
But Noah wasn't backing down. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, but making sure every word hit its mark.
Are you sure about that, Your Honor? Or are you just trying to cover up the fact that you made a mistake back then, and now you're about to make it again?
For the first time, Judge Holloway looked cornered. He avoided Noah's gaze. His hands gripped the edges of his desk. The mighty judge, the one who controlled so many fates, now looked like a man running out of options. Narrator. A single question now lingered in everyone's mind. Was Ethan Carter truly guilty? Or was Judge Holloway manipulating this trial to bury his past sins? The answer was just within reach. But when the truth finally surfaced, it would shake the entire courtroom to its core. To be continued. The real battle begins now. The courtroom was silent. Every single person, jury members, journalists, spectators, was waiting for attorney Noah Williams to reveal the evidence he held in his hands. Tension crackled in the air like a storm about to break. Noah locked eyes with Judge Holloway. Then, without a word, he placed the small recording device on the table. A single press of a button, and history changed forever.
I am innocent. The evidence was fabricated. They're trying to silence me.
The courtroom stood still. Then, chaos erupted. Gasps filled the air. Spectators turned to one another, whispering frantically. Jury members furrowed their brows as they listened. Reporters scrambled to jot down every word, but no reaction was as strong as Ethan Carter's.
That's my mother's voice?
Judge Holloway's face turned ghostly pale. His hands pressed against the desk, but his fingers trembled slightly. The entire courtroom could see his panic. Noah stepped forward, his voice unwavering.
25 years ago, you wrongfully convicted an innocent woman, and now you're trying to do the same thing to her son.
Judge Holloway's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. The silence in the room was heavy. Jury members leaned toward each other, whispering urgently. Reporters adjusted their cameras. Even the prosecutor seemed stunned. But Ethan Carter, he just stared at the judge. For years, he had searched for answers about his mother, and now the truth was right in front of him. The silence in the courtroom was no longer just silence. It was the calm before the storm, and everyone knew the storm was about to break. Finally, the sigh. The truth was out. Judge Holloway had always been known as a man of power, control, and cold authority, but now he was a man backed into a corner. No one dared to breathe. All eyes were locked on him, the once mighty judge who had decided the fate of so many people. Now looked like a man who had run out of options. Slowly, he inhaled. His lips trembled.
I was only following the law.
Number, you weren't following the law. You were protecting your own past. You sentenced Ethan's mother unjustly, and now you tried to do the same to him.
His words hit like a hammer. The entire courtroom froze. Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes brimming with both anger and heartbreak.
My mother, she didn't deserve this, and neither did I.
Judge Holloway leaned back in his chair, his fists clenched. He was furious, but more than anything, he was trapped. A quiet murmur spread through the room. Jury members whispered amongst themselves. Spectators sat motionless, waiting. Finally, the jury foreman stood. He held the verdict in his hands. He took a deep breath and spoke.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Ethan Carter, not guilty.
The courtroom exploded. For a moment, there was a stunned silence. Then applause erupted. Ethan let out a shaky breath. His eyes closed for a brief second. Then he looked up. He was free. But Noah knew this wasn't over. Across the room, Judge Holloway's face had hardened. He knew he had lost. And as he sat motionless in his chair, staring at his hands, he realized he had been buried under his own justice. Noah placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, but never took his eyes off Holloway.
Justice may be delayed, but it never stops.
Ethan turned, looking at the jury, the people who had just freed him. But deep inside, something still felt unfinished.
But what about my mother? Will she ever get justice?
Noah nodded. He already knew the answer. Because real justice was only just beginning. The end, or just the beginning,